meeting.
Good afternoon and welcome to the January 10th, 2023 Lawrence City Commission meeting. We'll start this off with a few words from Sherry.
Mayor, since we're doing the executive session, I think we'll read those when we come back because we'll have more people in attendance at the meeting, if that's okay with you.
Yep, that will work for me. First item of order is an executive session. Do I have a motion?
I move we recess an executive session for approximately 30 minutes to discuss a personnel matter involving the city employee pursuant to the non-elected personnel matter exception, KSA 75-4319B1. Justification for the executive session is to protect employee privacy. The city commission will resume its regular meeting in the city commission room at approximately 5:32 after the executive session is concluded.
To the second. Have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes 4-0.
Right.
And we send them there, if you're like, I've been on for the right away, you just want to talk to somebody. It's like, oh, I'm sorry.
So we're back and we have nothing to report. So we will reconvene our meeting at 5:45.
Okay.
I think that's all I need to do.
I don't know. Works for me.
Guys ready?
Mhm.
Good evening and welcome to the Lawrence City Commission meeting for January 10th, 2023. We will begin. Sherry has a few items she would like to address.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. If you are attending this meeting via Zoom, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on screen. When you are participating, please unmute and turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat, and all chats go directly to the meeting host. The city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. When the mayor calls for public comment, those attending in person should approach the podium to indicate they wish to speak. Those participating via Zoom should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. Participants will be called upon in the order they appear on the meeting host screen. Please state your name before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll begin our meeting with the approval of the agenda. The city reserves the right to amend, the City Commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting. Have a motion?
Second?
Have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Do we have Commissioner Sellers?
There she is.
Passes 5-0. We're on to recognitions. We'll start with the proclamation of January 16th as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Do we have anybody here to speak on that?
So this is my first in-person commission.
You're great. You're doing fine. Yeah.
Do you want me to speak first?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Frankie Haynes, and I'm the Diversity and Equity Coordinator at Lawrence Public Library. Like I said, this is my first in-person commission meeting, so sorry if I'm not looking in the right spot.
Glad to have you there.
Okay, and I do have something short to read, so I'll just read that, and thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to accept this proclamation. I believe that Martin Luther King Jr. Day acts as a reminder to honor Black history not only during this time, but at all times. It's a reminder of who came before us and all the work they did so that I can be standing here right now speaking to all of you. Dr. King believed that everybody can be great because everybody can serve. We all can honor Dr. King's service as a civil rights leader by doing service in our own community. This year, Lawrence Public Library will be celebrating Martin Luther King Day with a number of activities taking place in our auditorium on January 16th. It'll start at 10:30 with a story time. We're going to be screening a documentary in the afternoon, and there will be free tacos generously donated by Taco Zone. And at 2:30, Black Lawrence, which is a Black arts collective, will be doing a zine workshop and sharing some of their art. So please come by, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Frankie. Okay, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation. Whereas human trafficking, a modern form of slavery.
Oh, it's wrong.
Pardon me?
I think you have the wrong one.
Yeah, I think
you have the second one.
Oh, yeah. I did. Sorry about that, guys. Clicked on the wrong one. Thank you. We'll try this again. Whereas the city of Lawrence recognizes that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. devoted his life to eliminating injustice, racism, and fear with peaceful protests, unity, and understanding with the faith that in the end, racial justice and harmony would prevail. And whereas Dr. King endured imprisonment, physical violence, and adversity by government officials as well as racist evildoers to achieve change that would alter the course of American history with his leadership and practice of nonviolence, which continues to inspire this nation and the world to reaffirm the importance of education and fairness as the foundation to end prejudice and discrimination. And whereas Dr. King devoted his life to the advancement of civil rights and public service. He believed in a nation of freedom and justice for all and challenged all citizens to help build a more perfect union and live up to the purpose and potential of America. And whereas we continue to commit ourselves to the dreams of Dr. King in this special year of commemoration, we engage in the valuable activity of reserving a day towards that end, and we recall the legacy that the Reverend Dr. King created. And whereas it is remembered and the exceptional values expressed by Dr. King and his legacy as celebrated and recognized by national holidays and the building of monuments for him as a model of American patriotism. Therefore, I, Lisa Larson, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim Monday, January 16th, 2023 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Thank you.
We'll go on to our second proclamation, which is the Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Is there someone here to speak about that? Hi.
Hi. Hello, my name is Adrienne Nunez, and I am the Associate Director of External Affairs at the Willow Domestic Violence Center. First, I just want to say thank you so much to all the commissioners and Mayor Lisa Larson for your time and attention to this matter. The Willow has been serving survivors of human trafficking in Northeast Kansas since 2014. This has allowed us to connect with survivors and learn through our service to them. Due to misinformation and sensationalized stories that we see in the media all the time, people often believe that human trafficking looks like someone being kidnapped or physically restrained or just anything that's with the use of physical violence. Although those scenarios occur, what our clients have told us their experience is often not physical. It's more an emotional and psychological abuse and restraint that they experience. They feel like they've often been tricked or they've had their vulnerabilities exploited by somebody. Trafficking doesn't always occur in trafficking rings. A trafficker can be anyone, a friend, a family member, an intimate partner. In 2022, the Willow provided services to 19 survivors of human trafficking, with services ranging from safe shelter to court advocacy and case management. We are honored to continue to serve these clients and will continue to combat human trafficking through our services and prevention work. The Willow is grateful for the support of our local governments as we closely work with law enforcement and other community partners to best prevent trafficking in our community and serve those who have suffered at the hands of abusers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll read the proclamation. Whereas human trafficking, a modern form of slavery, is one of the largest and fastest growing criminal industries in the world and is based on recruiting, harboring, and transporting people for the purpose of exploitation. And whereas sex trafficking and labor trafficking occur in Kansas in both adults and children of any gender, socioeconomic status, age, race, sexual orientation, or geographical location can become victimized. And whereas human trafficking includes sexual, verbal, emotional, economic, and physical abuse and exploitation in all forms of abuse carrying long-term complex trauma implications. And whereas Kansas human trafficking laws define commercial exploitation of children, which does not require a showing of force, fraud, threat, or coercion, and references the existing statutory definition of human trafficking and aggravated human trafficking. And whereas the effects of human trafficking reach far beyond its victims and perpetrators, causing disruption in our schools, our places of work, and neighborhoods. And whereas the city strives to become a place where human trafficking does not exist, where people have their basic needs met, opportunities are available to them, and where all people are treated fully human and worthy of a supportive community and freedom. Now, therefore, I, Lisa Larson, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2023 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month and urges the citizens of Lawrence to speak out against sex and labor trafficking and exploitation, to support survivors of these heinous crimes, and to encourage community leaders to hold offenders accountable and to make preventable efforts a priority by hosting events, by creating policies at work, school, and home, and by supporting and participating in programs designed to reduce and eventually eliminate human trafficking as a social problem. As a community, we will commit to creating and executing a comprehensive, collaborative, and trauma-informed response for the safety and security of human trafficking survivors. All right, the next item is to recognize Diane Stoddard, our Assistant City Manager, for her service to our community.
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you very much for letting me take a few minutes here to celebrate and thank Diane Stoddard, Assistant City Manager. I'm going to make a few comments here, but her impact on this community is the magnitude is astounding. She is a hometown girl and started her service actually in high school. An LHS high school youth and government person sat up here on this dais and started her service career. Went on to public service and city management. She's, for our community and her 15 years of service here, has been both a formal and informal leader. And she's made her mark in economic development in a number of ways, most impressively and most recently, the Catalyst program that has continued to grow our economy here and is probably the leading impact in economic development was the program that she brought to us and shepherded. She worked diligently with our labor groups to develop a lot of the labor, the negotiations that we have, and built a strong relationship with those groups. She is dedicated both in her heart and professionally to historic preservation, especially here in this community, her hometown. Has guided arts and culture and built programs and continues to maintain programs that continue to grow that important part of Lawrence. She's helped plan all of the facilities that we enjoy and the ones that we will enjoy in the future. Those are parts of her dedication. Most notably, she caught a lot of visibility for walking every neighborhood in this community, covering over 300 miles, and helped to tell the story of all the neighborhoods that were out there. She's a mentor, an ethical and trusted person in our organization, and she's also been recognized in Kansas as a president of the KACM and an ICMA vice president, which she currently serves. I could go on and on and on. But there's such an impact that she's made personally and professionally in this community. And we wish her all the best in her continued journey as Leawood City Administrator, and know that she'll do great things. So thank you, Diane.
You will be missed. On to public comment. Public is allowed to speak on issues or items that are not scheduled for discussion on the agenda. Comments should be limited to issues and items germane to the business of the governing body. The commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. Do we have any general public comment?
Thank you. I'm Kirk Devine, 1929 New Hampshire, longtime Lawrence resident. I just wanted to speak for a moment. I attended the LPRD advisory board hearings last night. I've been involved with my recreational community quite a bit in the last month and a half, as the run-up to FIFA Play has been considered in our community. The result of the meeting appears to be that there will be some communication back and forth between LPRD and the commission. My understanding of it was the commission was tasked LPRD to come up with some ideas as to how to address the shortfall funds within the recreational community. I guess I'm here basically to try to register as strongly as possible the antagonistic attitude that the recreational public has for fee for play. It was ramped out very quickly as a very quick attempt to kind of band-aid the situation. We don't have complete information as to the shortfall funding. There were some presentations made. We have some ideas about it as to how big it is, some of the nuances of it. But really, the nuances are not very clear because we have a very short, not very detailed presentation coming back to the public about why this is occurring. It's a special situation, at least I believe, and there's a lot of people I think that do believe the same, particularly revolves around SPL and the promise that was made to the voting public that recreation would be without fees at SPL. I think that's a big part of it. It's much, much bigger than that in terms of how the perceived shortfall has been managed for the last 3 years since COVID. Very little detailed information related to that has come forward to the public. I'll give the advisory board a lot of credit for listening pretty carefully to the substance of those objections and a lot more. There were also some pretty enlightened ideas about how revenues could be increased without increasing fees and going for fee for play options. So the advisory board was somewhat split, if I understand right. I didn't stay for the very last vote.
Thank you, Kurt. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Could I just say it would be really behoove the public
Kurt,
if the commission would take this
I
on
need for you to
the
step
agenda.
back. Thank you.
That's really what I should have said at the beginning. All right.
According to the newspaper, you got $6 million extra. Why don't you help the guy out? Not that hard, but you guys don't care. Brad Williams, decertified. You guys all knew. Every fucking one of you knew. And to hell with the city attorney's office. Because when we came out and tried to call out his behavior and call out his bullshit that was going on the street, we got investigated. We got called stalkers and harassers because we utilized our First Amendment to come out and say no more. The citizens were done with that bullshit. What these people do, they fucking investigated us and helped the police do it. Maria Garcia helped the police do it. Megan Rubio investigated a bullshit Child Protective Services complaint. How fucking low can you go? Your officer is gone. Don't even think about interrupting me, Mayor. This is my time. It's my 3 minutes. How low can you guys go? He beat the shit out of Duck Tran and he's suing your asses for $3 million. You got another guy on the street that beats the shit out of people, shoves fingers into their neck using a pressure point for 14 solid seconds with not a single directive to comply with anything. Leaves visible marks and bruises, but you guys don't give a shit. You continue to let them do it. You let Rich Lockhart bring in bullshit reports to the CPRB. You let the police have control of the CPRB. Fuck the whole system. Because you guys are letting officers beat up your citizens and mistreat your citizens. And it's happening month after month after month after month. May 5th, 2021. The kid downtown that had Daubert's knees shoved in his back that he'd been complaining about for several minutes, and the officers acknowledged it. And not a one of them stopped him. August 29th, 2021. Officers show up and stalk around a house with flashlights, don't announce, beat on a door. And as soon as somebody comes to the door asking what's going on, they start screaming at him and throw him off his fucking porch. May 1st of this year, the victim of domestic violence, the person that was actually the only one with marks, arrested for utilizing his First Amendment, calling your cops exactly what they are, coward ass bitches. And then they assault him, and the chief exonerates it. And then he lies about the fucking reports.
Michael, you're
The police didn't even report the violence. They did not put it in their reports. Why?
Officer, please have him removed from the building, please.
You can't have me removed from the building. You can try that a little more, but you can't have me removed from the building, and he knows it. You don't like what I say, so you're going to have to.
Any other general public comment?
Hi, this is Chris Flowers, and I would just like to make some comments from about last week. Also, I'd like to, thank Commissioner Sellers for questioning the mayor's appointment last week. And also, not just for that, but when we had the election for the new mayor and vice mayor, for at least being willing to challenge how we do things. And I say that because when it came up about last week's mayor appointment, I'm sorry, I should have came better prepared for this, but I believe Commissioner Shipley was saying something along the line of, when it comes to appointments, we just accept what the mayor, who the mayor appoints. I mean, not just local, but at state and federal levels, that there's unqualified people being appointed for stuff, and that's just the way it is. And when I heard that, it just made me think, well, that's not the way it should be. And if there's something going on in politics where we say, well, that's just the way it is, we shouldn't be accepting that, and we should be challenging the way it is. And just when about last week's mayor appointment, that just makes me, I mean, that should show how important. Well, I mean, I don't really know how important it is, but when it comes to electing the mayor, that just giving each person 1 year, I mean, that's not a wise decision, because you're not taking into account who's going to be doing the best job. And if you want for there to be scrutiny, I guess, over mayor appointments, then you all should be electing who you think would be the best fit for the mayor. That's who you should be electing. And I think you should be scrutinizing mayor appointments. And when it comes to mayor appointments that should have been scrutinized, I think former Mayor Shipley's appointments for the new board that's going to be looking over the other boards. I mean, that was her last meeting as a mayor, right? And that board hadn't even been 30 days. I mean, if that hadn't been her last week, would she have nominated those people? That's just something to think about. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Any other general public comment from the audience? Not, we'll go on to Zoom. Any general public comments from Zoom?
No, Mayor.
All right. We'll move on to the next agenda item. The consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Members of the public wishing to speak on an item that has been pulled off the consent agenda will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Are there any commissioners that would like to have an item pulled from the consent agenda? Commissioner Sellers? Nope. All right, anybody from the audience would like to have anything pulled from the consent agenda? How about on Zoom? Anybody on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
All right. Then we'll ask for a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner
Aye.
Sellers? Aye. It passes 5-0. We'll move to the regular agenda item. Discuss policy options to reduce single-use plastic bags in the community, including a fee model, a ban model, or an educational campaign, and provide policy direction to staff. Who's going to start this? Kathy?
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I'm Kathy Richardson, the City of Lawrence Sustainability Director. And this week I have more of a voice and I'm feeling much better. So hopefully you can hear me okay. I will be sharing some slides. Porter.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I will be providing a brief presentation tonight and then open it up to Nancy Muma and Ben Sykes from the Sustainability Advisory Board for further information sharing. I do believe Nancy Muma is there in the commission room, and Ben Sykes will be joining us via Zoom tonight. After that, we will open it up for questions and discussion. And I also wanted to mention that Randy Larkin, the Deputy City Attorney, who's helped on this topic, is also here tonight to help answer any questions. So for tonight's discussion, it's on policy options to reduce single-use plastic bags in the community, including a fee model, a ban model, an educational campaign, or a combination of any of these, and to provide policy direction to city staff. That's what we're looking for. What are our next steps? So tonight I will briefly go over the topic with some background and timeline, as well as some of the recommendations that have been presented to the City Commission. So this topic has been talked about for several years now, but I think most notably the awareness was increased when a group of concerned elementary students from Kennedy Elementary made a presentation about the damaging effects of plastics to the City Commission back in 2018. Shortly after, the Sustainability Advisory Board voted to adopt the issue of single-use plastics as a priority. And they formed a subcommittee that researched the issue and recommended policy changes. Upon review of the report of policy research from the subcommittee, the Sustainability Advisory Board pushed that recommendation, which was to develop an ordinance which would impose a 16-cent per bag upon checkout fee. This is to be applied to the single-use plastic bags, but also single-use paper bags. And this recommendation was presented to the City Commission during a work session in August of 2019. I do want to mention that while I'm not getting into all the details of their work, the Sustainability Advisory Board did a lot of research on this topic and also received some help from KU with the research. And, they, their presentation during that work session went over, environmental impacts, social impacts, the business impacts, and then the policy research that had been conducted. And then during that work session, the City Commission had directed staff to explore the legal infrastructure and logistical implications of a band and or fee model. So the city staff did present an update in November of 2019, and it was an update of the work that had been completed so far. So city staff had met to explore the feasibility of policy options and had researched a couple hundred single-use plastic bag policies from across the country. And staff also concluded that the fee model ordinance would work here in Lawrence, and we began drafting that ordinance. So as staff worked on drafting that ordinance, which was not presented to City Commission because the work was kind of placed on hold while preemptive legislation was introduced in the early 2020 in the Kansas legislature, and that was prohibiting municipalities from adopting or enforcing an ordinance, a resolution, or regulation that restricts, taxes, prohibits, or regulates the use of containers such as like plastic straws and the bags, cups, containers, bottles, etc. So while this legislation did not pass, shortly after the pandemic also kept this topic on hold a bit longer. And in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, we see the preemptive legislation introduced again. A lot of activity with that, but was not successfully passed. At that time, the City Commission had asked for an update from the Sustainability Advisory Board on the single-use plastics. And in July of last year, 2022, the Sustainability Advisory Board presented a different recommendation than their original recommendation to the City Commission. So instead of a fee model, the latest recommendation was to develop an ordinance which would ban single-use plastic bags. And they did exclude single-use paper bags. So that was not their intention with the recommendation to ban the paper bags, just the plastic bags. So of the policy options, again, just going through, there's 3 that are outlined in this presentation. Some communities do a combination of these. I think that for sure, education outreach goes along with any policy option that you want to move forward with. But there is also the option of just the education component alone. But the first one to mention is this ordinance that establishes a per bag fee or the fee model. And again, this was the original recommendation from the Sustainability Advisory Board that was backed with a lot of research they had conducted. This one did include the single-use paper bags. And the idea behind using a per bag fee is to change behavior in the community with the fee. As I mentioned, city staff did begin the drafting of an ordinance for this fee-based model, and it was put on hold. It definitely needs some more work. And the biggest kind of section in question that would need some work is the enforcement piece. And just for both the per bag fee or the ban, enforcement is going to be that section that needs some work. So the other kind of eye opener when the city staff were working on the recommendation from SAB is that we would not be able to collect the fee. So the fee would stay with the retailer or the store. Originally, the Sustainability Advisory Board had recommended the fee to be collected and used for covering the administrative costs for implementation of this policy, as well as for outreach and education, and to support the low-income families. But that was something that our city attorney's office let us know was not a possibility. So the ordinance did not have us collecting the fee, but more like that the stores would keep that fee. The second policy option with the ordinance that places a ban on plastic bags. Again, the city commission could choose to add paper bags or just keep the plastic bags as the new recommendation from the Sustainability Advisory Board. And like I mentioned, advisory board members are with us tonight who will also address and talk about this. So the draft ordinance that was presented within the Sustainability Advisory Board update in July of 2019 was actually that ordinance that was originally drafted for the fee-based by our city attorney's office, and the Sustainability Advisory Board had edited that draft ordinance to turn it into that ban that was presented to the commission. But certainly our city attorney's office would need some time with that ordinance if the commission chooses to go with a ban. And like I mentioned before, the enforcement piece is the missing work that has the most cost and administrative work to figure out. So at this time, the commission could pass an ordinance that would be a fee-based or a ban, but we continue to watch for the possibility of preemptive legislation prohibiting us from doing so. I don't know if anybody else has a latest, but I did see in a news source that the Kansas Chamber of Commerce held a media day last Friday, and they outlined their 2023 plan for the legislative session. And one of those items on there was supporting legislation prohibiting local governments from banning consumer merchandise and plastic containers. That's all I've seen so far on that, and maybe somebody else has additional information for that. And then, like I mentioned, this hasn't come as a formal recommendation to the commission, but certainly has been talked about even within the Sustainability Advisory Board of a community-wide educational campaign that would encourage the use of sustainable alternatives to plastic bags. And this can be done with the help of a marketing firm to get the word out, get the educational piece, to have people kind of change behavior on that based on the information that we would be sharing through the educational campaign. So that's always a possibility. And again, educational campaign comes with any action that the commission would want to choose as well. We always talk about the items we bring up to the city commission in terms of our strategic plan. So just a reminder, our environmental sustainability commitment is a deep respect for our place in relationship with the planet and environment. And I did want to note that currently there are no key performance indicators that were prioritized that have a focus on waste reduction and pollution. But certainly this is something that the commission could choose to prioritize. And again, just what the policy options, if any, should be pursued for further action or a combination of these. I've seen a community that has a ban on plastic bags and a per bag fee for paper bags. So that's an example of a combination, and of course with the educational campaign. But as outlined here, ordinance that establishes a per bag fee, ordinance that enacts a ban on plastic bags, and the development of a community-wide educational campaign. Now I'm going to stop sharing so I can give Nancy the opportunity to speak, and she should be there in the room.
Hi, Mayor and City Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak about this. So I'm on the Sustainability Advisory Board, and I just want to talk a little bit about why we wanted to. U.S. production of plastics has resulted in at least 232 million tons of CO2. That's about the same.
Yeah, you might speak into the microphone.
There you go. Should I start over? Sure. Okay. So thank you for letting me speak to here today. What I want to talk about is why we want to do this. So plastic production in the United States has resulted in at least 232 million tons of CO2 each year since 2020. That's about the same as 116 average size coal power plants. That's a lot of CO2. In addition to the CO2, you've got toxins and catalysts that are involved in the production, and these result in emissions. These are toxic. These are things like hexavalent chromium that Lawrence's own Aaron Brockovich brought to light, things like PFAS. Both of these are very carcinogenic. And then there's endocrine disruptors, which have a huge impact on our hormone regulation, just mess it up, okay? Yale opinion poll found that in Kansas, 68% of the population believes climate change is going on now, and they want CO2 to be regulated. Just in Douglas County, 77% of people acknowledge that climate change is happening now and are worried about it. 60% of folks in Douglas County want local municipalities like you guys to regulate and impact climate change. Right? 69% that think that local individuals in Douglas County should also play a role in reducing climate change. So reducing single-use plastic bags would address both of those things, that would address the issue of wanting to have municipalities address climate change and individuals, okay? So 40% of all plastics produced in the United States are single-use plastics. So banning or putting a fee on single-use plastics will reduce production of single-use plastics and reduce climate change by reducing CO2 production. So hundreds of cities and municipalities across the US regulate single-use plastics and single-use plastic bags. I think now is the time for Lawrence to regulate single-use plastic bags, not just educate and regulate. Involve the citizens of Lawrence as the citizens of Douglas County have asked to happen, okay? So the city, I think, has done a really good job of starting to address climate change in reducing its CO2 and its carbon footprint that's produced by the city itself. But I think now's the time to involve citizens, right? So if we can involve citizens by reducing single-use plastics, we'll reduce CO2 production, we'll reduce climate change. Now is the time to institute regulation, not just education, for single-use plastics. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
I also see Ben Sykes from the Sustainability Advisory Board. Ben, would you like to share any other information?
Yeah, Ben Sykes. I think now the vice chair of the Sustainability Advisory Board. And I think both Kathy and Nancy did a fantastic job of outlining. Can you guys hear me okay? Yep. Okay, cool. Excuse me, the significant research and debate and ultimately products that have been made through these recommendations. I want to touch on the research for just a second and how wide-ranging the research was to produce these, including things like what constitutes a single-use plastic bag, what millimeter thickness, what those might be replaced by, what are the impacts of a ban versus fees on the environment, on businesses, and on our citizens, and particularly looking through the equity lens about how that might happen for bans versus fees. We also look carefully at the many existing models that are out there. There are plenty of places that have done these things before, and what worked for cities that are our size and other places. And in fact, that was done multiple times over this 3-year dance of the SAB figuring out and responding to the changes in what we might do. The ban that's being proposed is not radical, I would say. More than 150 cities and towns in the US have banned single-use plastics. Many more have considered them, but have failed, oftentimes because of significant lobbying from the petroleum or the plastics industry. We've now had ample time for Lawrence citizens, I think, and community members to voice their opinions on this. There's been a comfortable and long-term conversation through the press and other places about what this might mean. And the conversation was necessary, I think. But I think now is the time to act, and that includes both regulation and education. So the proposed ban has a 9-month window to educate the public and to get everybody up to speed on what this looks like and what it would mean. And a wide-ranging educational campaign, is a core component of the ban that we've recommended. It's not a standalone option. We want that as a part of it. And I would just say that if you look at most of the public comments that have been submitted tonight, almost all of those are in favor of the ban. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Anything else, Kathy?
That concludes just our presentation and thoughts, and just opening it up to questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back here. Questions for staff?
I would ask Kathy a question, or anyone. I guess I was making an assumption in my mind over these many years that we've been discussing this, which is that paper bags can be recycled. So in my mind, I put them in a different category than one-use plastics. And Kathy, I know you have a great deal of experience with our recycling center. So maybe you could make me feel better or make me feel worse about recycling paper bags, and whether we should put that in maybe in a different category, or keep the former recommendation to charge for paper bags.
You're correct in saying that paper bags are recyclable, and there's more recycling going on of those versus the plastic bags. But the research that the Sustainability Advisory Board presented back in 2019 included paper bags because of the impact of making the bags. So the number of trees, and I know they had a lot of data to present on the trees that are taken down to produce the paper bags. And then also the paper bags take more energy to create than the plastic bags. And there was a lot of research on that too. I believe they had a slide on it, and I don't know off the top of my head the details, but I do know it's the energy of production and the resource to make the bags. But you're right in the fact that they're heavily recycled.
Any other questions?
Yeah, it's thank you for this presentation, by the way. And Kathy, I had a question regarding the enforcement part of it. Looks like that was a bit of a hang up. Is that something that, you know, if we were to proceed on either road down here, that would be, you know, something that could be accomplished?
Absolutely. So the conversations that I've had with Randy, and Randy, please chime in here, have involved that we could go either way with the fee-based or the ban. Either way, the ordinance needs a lot of work still, and we need to figure out the enforcement piece. But just for you all to understand that the enforcement piece of this implementation of this policy is going to be, take a lot of staff time. I think that if you want to prioritize this, this work and this ban or fee model, it can be done. Randy, do you want to add to it?
I really don't have anything to add. She stated it perfectly.
So where would the enforcement fall? What department would it be under? Codes with Brian?
That would have to be a decision that we would make as we craft the enforcement procedure. We'd have to figure out who or what department would be involved in that and whether or not there would be additional staffing or additional budgetary needs to do that. And then we could go from there. So that hasn't been decided yet where it would be done, but that is a place that could be placed with.
Amber has a question.
Amber? Commissioner Sellers?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for members of the advisory board and or Kathy. And Kathy, you sound wonderful this week, so what a difference a week makes, I tell you. On the enforcement piece, because I went back and looked at the presentation from 2019. We said the ordinance needs a lot of work, which that's one piece that we can talk about in discussion, but I didn't see where there was any high level discussion around funding for the enforcement. And I'm going to piggyback that with the conversation around the fee. And so first start with the enforcement piece. If the idea was, and I think I heard you say that that legal said that we couldn't collect the fee that was recommended, then my question is, did the board talk about high level how they expected the city to fund the enforcement side of it?
I can jump in just to reiterate the information about the fee. The Sustainability Advisory Board's recommendation back in 2019, they were counting on that fee collected by the city to support the administrative work on implementation and enforcement and the educational component of the work for this. I'll let Ben or Nancy speak on maybe more recent conversations as to how that would be funded.
Yeah, I can't see if Nancy's stepping to the podium. She certainly could speak to it. I think that we did have some discussions about how that enforcement piece would go, and the idea as well, Commissioner Sellers, that would probably peak and then taper off quite a bit as that just became a background thing, that those are band wide. It would be unlikely, but I do think that it's an important point of how that would be financed. And yeah, the original model with the bag fee is, as Kathy laid out and as you did as well, that was an important piece both for an ongoing educational campaign as well as for the administration of it early. But that is another thing as well that has to constantly be taken care of, right? If you have a fee for it, you have to constantly carry that forward and do all the budgeting and administration of that. Whereas a band does have a significant administrative fee to start with, but then at least ostensibly that would go down over time, and that would just be the case here, right? Yeah. Again, I can't see Nancy. She led the subcommittee, might be able to speak better to it.
Nancy, did you want to step up? She's coming, Ben.
Yeah, I think the idea was that the fee was considered a tax, and so it couldn't be collected and used for administering this. As Ben said, initially there would be some cost for the education, but that would go down significantly as people became more used to the fees or the ban. There would be lower costs in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So then my question would be to staff, specifically the legal. If there's other communities who collect it, is it state statute that triggers it, that it'll be a tax, therefore we can't collect it, or what? Because I just looked up 5 different municipalities within our region that does it, and 10% stays with the business to cover the cost of bags that they have, period, and then the other is directed to the city. So where did we get that if we get the fee option?
I'm not aware of any in Kansas that can charge it. We're prohibited by state law from doing an excise tax, and if we charged a fee for the plastic bags for the use of them and we collected the funds, then it becomes an excise tax. And that's the problem with doing that. I assume that those within the region are in other states, and they probably have different laws. I know Boulder, Colorado, for example, has a fee and they collect it and that goes towards the city of Boulder, but we're unable to do that based upon the way the tax laws are written in Kansas.
So that's what I wanted to hear. So there's preemption by state statute of tax laws that prevent us from doing that. But you may have brought up a cheat code that I'm not going to bring up on record on state preemption on this. So I'll leave that to myself. But thank you. That answers that question for me. The other question I had was, well, it was in regards to the fee, which we already know we kind of sort of can't do because it's an excise. So the fee, if the idea was to go with a fee policy option, you were saying that the fee would stay with the business, then what would be the anticipation if that was an option? Are you just hoping on good faith that businesses would do what with those funds? Or is this why you're offering, I don't want to, it sounds like you're kind of putting us in a little bit of a hole here. So I'll pause on that one because that's a discussion and we're not in discussion yet. My question is, when you were doing conversations in 2019 and up until this point, did you target any type of public engagement with specific marginalized groups such as seniors, elders? Did you talk to League of Women Voters, NAACP, WIC? So these are populations that may disproportionately utilize plastic goods. So in the conversation around putting this together, I know that the advisory board did that work, but what background work from the community was done by the advisory board to understand the impact of this locally on marginalized groups?
Nancy?
So I'd like to address that question. We met with local grocery vendors in the area to see what they would prefer, to see what their input was. And they were saying that they preferred a ban over a fee because of the accountability issues of collecting the fees.
Yeah.
And are asking them to account for how many plastic bags they charged for so that we would have the feedback to know what it was. Now, several groups in the area, such as Sierra Club, have donated 1,000 reusable bags to Just Foods for low-income people and to the Senior Resource Center for seniors. So those plastic bags or reusable bags are available to low-income people. We didn't meet particularly with low-income individuals or people who would have difficulty, but I know that 1,000 bags have been donated for their use.
So from a coalition standpoint, what other groups outside of Sierra Club have you directly engaged with to build that education and advocacy piece and understanding around environmental sustainability, environmental justice, and the impact of plastic bags? You know, did you do a presentation with NAACP? Did you do a presentation with other organizations, schools? Or was this just research and some of those high-level groups that you already know are who are on board? I just want
So what we wanted to do was to include in this policy, in this ordinance, those sorts of outreaches. That's what the education piece for the first, I believe, 9 months was supposed to do, was to reach out to these communities, to educate them and avail them of the resources that they would need to follow these policies. So we didn't reach out ahead of time. We have talked to numerous groups within Lawrence, such as Lettuce and Sustainability Action Network, as I said, Sierra Club. So numerous groups within the community have been discussing these issues. And the idea would be educating the community for somewhat like 9 months ahead of time, reaching out to these communities that would we would want to talk to.
Okay, so it sounds like to me that you want to build the education and engagement piece into the ordinance, but there is no strategy to build up to that.
So the idea was that we would include the education within the ordinance, and that's the way it's written for the ban that was presented in July. Is that what you're asking?
Kind of, sort of, but not really. So then the education piece, who do you envision being the strategy for that? So tell me about the education piece. What is your strategy around that?
So the idea,
what does that playbook look like?
well, one of the things that the Sustainability Advisory Board has talked about is the goal in the strategic plan to have numerous presentations and outreach to the community about climate change, and this would be a big piece of it. So things like the Earth Day that we do every year, except during COVID, and reach out through the communication pieces, such as the city. Kathy, can you help me? What's the city outreach?
The flame.
Flame.
The flame. Thank you. Yeah.
Which should be called the Phoenix, in my opinion, but.
Okay, so those are some of the things that we had discussed, but it really does need to be fleshed out.
Okay, so as it currently stands, there is no documented plan for what that engagement is going to look like if we approve some. If an ordinance was approved, you don't have anything right now that shows what your strategies are in the engagement piece, who you plan to engage, high level, how you think you're going to do it, presentation, events, so on and so forth.
We don't have that, but that is certainly something that the Sustainability Advisory Board would be happy to work on.
Okay.
I do also want to add, if I can, just to help a little bit here, at least on the staff's perspective. When I read through the update that was provided in November of 2019, the city staff had gone, through with the recommendation of the Sustainability Advisory Board, done some more research, and in it outlined that the staff was with the Sustainability Advisory Board was going to start engaging in listening sessions in order to hear from stakeholders who may be impacted by the proposed policy. So this is at the end of 2019, where there was plans to implement these listening sessions at the beginning of 2020. So we would do that. And then it seemed like the draft of the ordinance that was being worked on would then be presented with the information collected from the listening sessions. Again, the work was placed on hold at the beginning of 2020 because of the preemptive legislation that occurred. But I did look back in the notes from the former director, and it seemed like there were plans to engage stakeholders who would be impacted.
Yeah, this is just Ben Sykes. If I could just add, we did talk to a number of people that that volunteer and that work with some of these groups, including Just Food, including shelters and things like that. You're absolutely right, Commissioner Sellers, that we haven't had targeted outreach to organized groups that would represent those people. And I think that that's valuable. And I think we should do that. I think I have questions about whether or not that would be something for the SAB to do, or whether or not it would be something for city staff to do once something was passed that we were going to do this ban, which side of that comes on. And I think the other part of that is, what the order of operations here is. Like, do we have, we've had more than 3 years of discussion about what plastics are doing and what we can do on the regulation side for it for individuals across our community, right? So but you're right that the Sustainability Advisory Board, the volunteer board, didn't go out and meet with these individual groups, a huge number of them. But we have had ample time and more than a year now on this ban element to have discussions in our community about it.
And Ben, I don't disagree with that. This is not discussion, this is question. I will say, to answer your question, it's collaborative. So I think it's a little bit of, it's both. We have the resources and the staff, but I think it's a balance of both, because you represent that group. So you all are the subject matter experts utilizing the resources to drive that message. Mayor, I have no other questions at this time.
Any other questions for staff?
Just kind of a follow-up. One of the things that was mentioned there was pairing this some with the climate action plan and some of the work we're going to be doing in education there. What is the timeline? I know we're working, and I know there's a meeting tonight, I think, on some parts of the climate action plan, but what's the plan? What's kind of timeline that, and how do you see those two matching up? Kathy?
Yeah, the climate action plan currently this month are the final focus group meetings, listening sessions that are occurring. And you're right, there's one tonight. And then after this month, and we've, the Douglas County staff is leading this effort, but they've collected all the data from the surveys, from the additional outreach that was done through the, Sunrise Project, and these listening sessions from the focus groups. The draft of the climate action plan is going to begin next month. And there is a steering committee that's been meeting monthly. I think they're the one this month, that meeting got canceled because of the focus groups, but they're meeting monthly, as well as a staff group from the cities and the county. And we hope to this spring have a draft and then move forward with some implementation here pretty soon this year.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, what was the community engagement piece? How long did that take for the climate action plan? I'm just curious.
Oh my, it's been going on for quite a while. Sorry, pandemic and COVID, it got in the middle of both of these topics that we're discussing. So it did start a while ago, but 2020 was supposed to be the year of the full-on community engagement, and that did not work out. So by the end of 2021 is when the survey had gone out, and the county and the city had contracted with these groups for reaching out to the voices that are not always heard. So there was a group that was reaching out and collecting stories all through the fall of 2021. And in the spring of 2022 is when the summary was completed, as well as KU students were hired for analyzing the survey data, which showed gaps in the Douglas County as a whole and who had responded to the survey. So that is why very quickly was put into motion to create these focus groups, of which are identified areas that are missing, the voices that are still missing from the engagement for the climate action plan. So, we're going on 2 years here, it seems like, of that community engagement in different formats.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I was just curious, I know the pandemic fell in between that, but lessons learned that we can apply to potentially a single-use plastic, whatever we decide here today. And because the 9-month part of it kind of sounded a bit optimistic to me in terms of community engagement and education. So I was just curious.
Any other questions for staff? And we'll open it up for public comment on this item. Any public comment from the audience?
Thank you, commissioners. My name's Terry Wilkie. I'm a happy resident of Lawrence, Kansas. I first brought this to the Sustainability Advisory Board in 2011. Eileen Horn was the head of the Sustainability Advisory Board, and they kicked it around for a period of over a year. And then it was determined not to continue it. It wasn't of priority. I think that was their language exactly. And then I took a year off. I was employed at the time. And in 2016, I went back to the Sustainability Advisory Board again. And I have also been on record as addressing the City Commission. Perhaps you all remember that headline where I said, we all have plastic is everywhere. Plastic is in our water. It's in our streets. It's in our yards. If you slaughter an animal, you're going to find a plastic bag in there. it's scientifically proved that everyone has got plastic in their blood. All of us do. Now then, I have refined that thought to see the importance as well, is that I understand that the exploitation of the environment with fracking and drilling, they make a lot of oil. There was a big oil pipeline that just broke here in Kansas. And that oil is being used to make plastic bags because they can only sell so much oil and make a profit. They want to make huge. And so they use it to make plastic bags. And that's why there is a public sentiment in support of plastic bags. All right. You might be surprised, but I was born before plastic bags were invented and we were all surviving just fine. I remember when they came on, we didn't even know the ramifications of this. I always am surprised to hear the city concerned about collecting a fee, because the city of Lawrence collects 2 cents on every sales tax dollar for Parks and Rec. And I have never understood why then collecting money on plastic bags is any kind of a problem. The purpose of the ordinance is to educate the people. It won't take everyone long to figure out to bring their own plastic bag. It's an easy thing to do. Finally, I brought a document that I'm a member of the Sustainability Advisory Board, and we have an online petition that's got over 298 signatures of Lawrence citizens that would like to see city ordinance restricting the use of plastic bags. Thank you.
Other public comment on this item?
Good evening. I'm Joe Douglas. I'm a longtime resident of Lawrence. As a retired physician and as a still practicing grandfather, I'm particularly concerned with one of the possible deleterious effects of plastics, and that is the health effects. I think the verdict still is out on many of the compounds that plastics expose us to, but there are strong suggestions of adverse effects on various body systems. But there is little definitive proof. We do know that some specific chemicals clearly are harmful. Biphenyl A or BPA clearly is an endocrine disruptor, and the EPA ordered that taken out of plastics that are used in food and water. But plastics, as has been said, are ubiquitous. There are a zillion kinds of plastic, and it deteriorates into tiny particles, microplastics, nanoparticles, they're called. And these plastics are in our bodies, as we heard. They're in our food, they're in the air, they're in the water, they're in the bodies of newborn infants. They are everywhere. And one thing we do know for sure, and that is in the eons of human evolution, nothing in our history has prepared our physiology to deal with plastic. Plastic bags, by their very nature, degrade more readily than other types of plastic. In the production of shopping bags, chemicals are added to increase strength and flexibility. The most common type of these is known to cause reproductive abnormalities in animals, and there's no reason to think it wouldn't do that in humans. There was a study reported last fall in the journal Human Reproduction Update, which studied several hundred peer-reviewed studies on sperm counts. And these are from all around the world. And they found that there is a worldwide decline in sperm counts roughly over the last 50 years. And this is accelerating. And this is thought to be due to environmental contaminants, including the residue of plastics. So I guess my point is that we're being exposed to being inundated with plastic. We're all subjects in a worldwide experiment to see what this stuff does to us. And I think we need to take every chance we have to get rid of plastic use. And I know there's an easy alternative to plastic shopping bags.
Time.
I haven't used one in a long time.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Other public comment, Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Allman with Sustainability Action Network. I had written in this that Sustainability Action Network had initiated this in 2015, but Terry Wilkie corrected me. 2011, she made her first attempt. 2015 was the second attempt. So the Sustainability Advisory Board, they did their due diligence. They got this KU master's class to do research for them. They brought a proposal to you. It's been discussed at length. It's time now to ban single-use plastic bags. This proposal is straightforward, it's understandable, and it's commonplace. If you have availed yourself to the 11 pages of plastic bag resources that we've provided in public comment, you will know the magnitude of the problem. An education campaign is a necessary component of an ordinance, but by itself, it will not mitigate climate disruption in any meaningful time frame. Plastics are fossil fuel. And remember, the City Commission has committed Lawrence to wean ourselves from fossil fuels by 2035. If there is any one number to remember in those 11 pages of resources, it's 38 million barrels of automobile gas produced globally per day. As all the world auto manufacturers transition to 100% electric vehicles by 2035, how will petroleum companies address their loss of those 38 million barrels of gas per day? Well, their plan B is to make plastics out of that oil. Now you understand the magnitude of the problem. And I hope no one here will try to say that a plastic bag ban will inordinately impact low-income people. Climate disruption impoverishes us all, especially low-income folks. In many ways, inflation from billions of dollars of disaster damage, rising insurance premiums, crop losses, and rising food prices, rising energy costs. And then think of the plastic bags that jam our sewage treatment plant that cost our city more money. There's all kinds of ways that it costs more. So with a fair transition program within the ordinance, subsidies can eliminate the impact on low-income people. And I want to share this with you. This is a reusable bag. It's 30 years old. It's ripstop nylon like you make tents out of. I sold this at Simple Goods General Store downtown 30 years ago. You don't know how many thousands of uses this has been put to. Convenient, simple.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Thank you. Any other general public comment on this item?
Yes. Hi, my name's Nicole. I was just going to comment on some of your comments. This was supposed to be about plastic bags, but then it turned into plastic is in our blood, newborn blood. All of those things are true, but we're going to have to get rid of a lot more than plastic bags if we're going to really deal with that problem.
Just discuss.
Thank you. You know, the coats people are wearing, the bags they're carrying, the masks they're wearing, these all have plastic and nanoparticles and the things that we're claiming these plastic bags have that are so dangerous. My biggest thing is I don't understand how this is a priority right now for the city of Lawrence with everything that the city and country is dealing with. It just kind of shows how out of touch leaders are with what citizens are going through. Be good to know where this 16-cent fee, if a fee is decided upon, would go to. Sounds like it would go to paying people to enforce this ordinance. Just bringing paper bags into the conversation at all is kind of confusing. What's wrong with paper now? Why not promote the planting of more trees if the paper is also a problem? That could help, you know, counteract any CO2 emissions that people are worried about. It sometimes seems like climate activists aren't really looking for solutions such as planting a lot more trees. They're looking for ways to place more control on the people. Who has decided that plastic bags are single use? I know I use or reuse plastic bags all the time. I have a bag of plastic bags, and everyone in my family uses them for a lot of different things. Why pursue a program to find ways to, or why not pursue a program and find ways to increase recycling or reuse of plastic bags locally and not punish the public by charging them more of their hard-earned money when they're already dealing with higher grocery bills and increase in property taxes, higher gas prices, 2 years of high inflation. There's a lot of people dealing with financial problems right now. The first presenter stated that the goal of the plastic bag ban would be to change the behavior of citizens. And it just seems like that's always what it comes down to for local and federal government. They become obsessed with finding ways to manipulate the people in order to change their behavior and not just encouraging them to make responsible decisions themselves. Always seems to come back to control and power. And the second speaker said that the production of plastic bags emits CO2. Just seems to me like another climate change grift. We've seen these types of things take place: Seattle, Los Angeles, New York City. The activists encourage creation of more expensive.
Nicole, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Other public comment on this item?
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I'm okay with a ban on plastic bags. I mean, I think we'll learn to get used to it. I've switched to using paper bags. I have some reusable bags. I keep forgetting to bring them with me, but I have no problem with the paper bags. It's not that much harder than a few plastic ones. Also, when it comes, I'm okay with the ban, but I think the city should maybe not make bans on some stuff, but just give recommendations. Like when it comes to other plastic stuff, like when it comes to straws, I think the city should issue a statement saying we encourage restaurants not to hand out straws unless the customer asks for it. And I'm just, because where I work, we hand out straws on deliveries, but I don't want to sometimes. I think, well, this is unnecessary. Why can't the customer just drink it out of the cup? But I can't say anything. But I mean, if the city issued a response saying, hey, don't send out straws unless the customer asks, I would be a bad employee and I would use that as my out to not give the customer straws. So that's what I'm asking you to do, is think of other things that are bad for the environment, that maybe there'd be too much outcry if we did a complete ban, but you could still encourage it to reduce some of the effects just by encouraging. And I guess it is educating the people about what behaviors we can take to for a better environment, I guess. And I think I'll support a ban. I'd prefer a ban to a tax. Well, I guess it's not a tax, it's a fee. I think that's going to be more complicated than, I mean, if it's a ban, well, at least you know what you can't do. But I mean, if it's a fee, you're going to have to be doing POS systems with that, the fee. And I don't know. I think it'd be more likely to be successful if it's a ban than a fee. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Other public comment on this item from the audience?
Hi, Thad Holcomb with representing Lettuce. It's difficult to get rid of a convenience addiction. I'm addicted to convenience also, as we are in this society. And I can't brag like Michael did. Mine only is 5 years old, and he's probably going to wear out sometime. But I basically tonight just want to share with you my interest in listening, because I read all the letters that were sent to you and I've heard tonight. I'm also on the Climate Action Plan, a representative there. And just a little vignette that I was present at a well-attended gathering at Haskell with collecting a focus group, and they came up with the priorities on climate as water and the biodiversity issues. And certainly plastic ban addresses both of those in a very positive way to get rid of them. And LETA certainly was pledged in, and we continue to, if an educational program needs to happen, we would very much take the time and energy to spread that among the faith communities, because it is an equal justice concern. And one we take seriously, and we think it's not the answer to all, but it raises the question where we can discuss other aspects of the need to address climate ban. So thank you for consideration for some action on this ordinance.
Thank you. Other public comment on this item from the audience?
Hello, my name is Hank Warisco. I think it is difficult for people to realize that when they go shopping, I mean, you know, they pick up a plastic bag. It's very convenient. How is that going to affect, you know, the world? I mean, is my little piece going to actually damage everything? If everyone believed that, then things will get damaged, you know. It's hard to imagine climate change, our influence on climate change. For many years, many people still don't believe that that's a reality. Although if you do the math on it, it really is. It can easily be proven that that's the effect. So I think it's time to act, to really have a little bit of inconvenience. And I believe that a total ban would be the way to go, rather than a 16 cents or whatever fee, because that won't eliminate anything, you know. And it may be a little inconvenient. It may be a little out there in a sense in the beginning, but I think, you know, people will soon look at it as a new norm, and it'll be an easy thing to do once we get used to the transition. And I think the transition should happen, and making decisive action is one way to really do it. And so I hope you come to a good conclusion. And thank you.
Thanks, Hank.
My name is William Steele. And, you know, Ben Sykes is right. This is not a radical proposal. Before I moved to Lawrence 16 years ago, I lived in Eugene, Oregon, where they have a fee-based ordinance on plastic bags. I think at that time when I was living there, it was like 5 cents per bag. And I got in the habit, because of that fee, I got in the habit of using a single-use bag like this, which I bought 16 years ago, just before I moved to Lawrence, actually. I bought this reusable bag, and I've been using it ever since. And I estimate that just with this single bag alone, I have saved about 2,500 single-use plastic bags at the checkout. Because, you know, when you go to Dillon's, they always give you too many bags, right? I could probably fill 3 bags that they give you at Dillon's in this single bag here. So I've just with this one bag, I have saved 2,500 single-use plastic bags. Now, if you multiply that by the number of residents that we have just in Lawrence, Kansas alone, it's like 250 million single-use plastic bags. Now, I don't know what the numbers are nationally. I'm sure Nancy probably has the figures, or even Michael would have those figures off the top of their head, but it's a significant number of bags, just you know, for what this one bag would remove from our environment. So I think this is not only something that's really a symbolic positive first step that we can take, but it's really it's very impactful in what this is going to do to reduce waste in our environment and improve our health in general. So I urge the council not just to put a fee on this, but to take the next step and ban them outright, because as Ben said, this is not a radical proposal. Many other communities have done this, and it's simply, I think at this point it's beyond debate, and it's the right thing to do for this community. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Other public comment on this item from the audience?
Hello, I'm Linda Weinmaster.
I don't have that strong of an opinion on either way. I've lived in communities and recycled for nearly 40 years in Florida, and I like to save the environment. But what I don't like is people telling me what I have to do. I'm a big girl. I can take care of myself. I can make choices on my own. And that's what we need to do. Educate the population. I have reusable bags, but I don't think it's right to put an ordinance, especially with everything that's going on in this town. This town's falling apart. We don't need to be forced to do these things. And there are people that won't do them no matter what you do. Just wanted to say that. But yeah, we don't need a ban. We need education.
Thank you, Linda. Other public comment from the audience? Let's go to Zoom.
Ben Poff.
Hey, thanks so much for letting me talk, and thanks so much to the advisory board and everyone on the commission and all your hard work. I just want to say, as a local business owner here in Lawrence, I think the ban on plastic bags is a great idea. I think the 16-cent tax is just overcomplicating a simple solution. I would just push for an outright ban. I think the Lawrence community is educated and able to deal with what small consequences they would face. Thank you so much.
Margaret Kramer.
Hi, I'm Margaret Kramer, and I would like to share a short story with you to begin with. When I began my professional life, I attended a company where if you want to cause total and complete disruption in your office, go early in the morning and rearrange everyone's desks. The point being that we get so paralyzed and so frightened of any change. I mean, we just fight change. It's just in our nature to be fighting change. When you think about this logically, people are going to have 9 months, I think the SAB recommended, to get used to the idea. Simply bring another bag. You're not going to have the plastic anymore. And as for the argument that people cannot afford this, all you have to do is start saving, like some of the speakers have said tonight, start saving the plastic bags that you have now. This is not a financial burden. It's a very simple thing, a very simple change that we can make in our lifestyles. And yes, it is necessary. The earth, needs us to pay attention now. Thank you.
Dawn Hawkins.
Hi, this is Dawn Hawkins. Can you hear me? Okay. I just wanted to chime in and say that I support the full ban on plastic bags, and I hope that you finally pass this. Indeed, it's not enough. It's past time for us to ban all single-use plastics in our community and join the many municipalities across the country that have already done so. I don't really support the fee-based plan, as I think it's unwieldy, and it should be up to stores to decide if they want to offer non-plastic bags and whether or not they charge for them. Regarding the effect on the impoverished, I think this is not a concern at all. I don't consider myself impoverished now, but I raised my 2 daughters as a poor single mom. Many poor folks shop at Aldi grocery store as one example because of their affordable prices, where you have to pay for your bags or bring your own. And if you stand around very long, you find out that most people load up their groceries with bags that they bring or boxes that they find in the store. This is a simple, easy to implement model. The idea of reaching out to groups or individuals to gather opinions is nice, but the fact is that there have been ample opportunities for voicing concerns in prior commission meetings, various board meetings, such as the Sustainability Advisory Board, for the literal years that this has been a public conversation here. The folks here today who are who you should be listening to and represent a vast array of economic status. Clearly, support of this ban is overwhelming. I feel it's time for this commission to stop wasting time and just get this done. There's no time left to waste. Thank you.
Kathleen Harned.
Okay. I believe that we vote for our city commissioners because we believe that they are going to make decisions based on what's best for the community. When I heard a mention about the recommendations of the Chamber of Commerce, I would like to make a statement that the Chamber of Commerce does not make recommendations that are based on the good of the community. So we need to keep that in our focus. They are not our commissioners. Even though there are many citizens that may be climate deniers, there's really no one that is a plastic pollution denier because it's all around us. It's undeniable, easy to see. I sent a letter with some very specifics, and I also wanted to remind everyone that Sustainability Action Network had a very simple petition on our little Facebook page that doesn't get all that much attention. And we had 298 signatures of people supporting banning single-use plastic bags. It's a place to begin. It's not the be-all, end-all. But many communities have done this. This is not hard. And all we need to do is really make a plan and be committed to it. If we just want to look at the financial aspect, then think about the fact that ham recycling, it costs a lot more for them to pay someone to reach into the trash and pull every bag out of it, because those bags are not recyclable. At least not with our machinery here in Lawrence. And perhaps in New York City, they might have a way to do it, but not here in Lawrence. So I believe that it's time. This is time to fulfill the expectations of a very progressive, well-educated community. We've been talking about it for a long time, and it's time to make a plan. Thank you.
Jerry Metz.
Jerry, you're on mute.
Hello.
You there?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thanks much. I haven't talked to the commission before. This is just, it's a crazy issue. I use like, bags. Then you got Cabela's bags. You're gonna ban Cabela's bags? You can carry like 60 pounds of something in the Cabela's bag. And every single one of my trash cans is designed for the grocery bags. So you're gonna send me to Walmart and Amazon instead of using, because I reuse my Dillon's bags and then I put them in the trash, use them for my cat, But you're going to send me to Dillon or Walmart and Amazon to buy a single-use bag? Is that what this is about? It doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
Any other public comment or on Zoom?
I believe that's all the comments, Mayor.
Yes, yes. One more.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That name had spoken before. Yeah, sorry. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm Tad Kramar, and I'm just asking to please ban single-use plastic bags now. This has been studied and discussed for years, and there's no reason for further delay. Plastic bags' immense harm to the environment, climate change, wildlife, and aesthetics is well documented. A ban would avoid the collection and compliance issues, imposing a fee, and would be far more effective than educational efforts alone, which would have limited success at best. A ban would not harm the poor. Most people at Just Food already bring their own bags. With adequate lead time before the ban becomes effective, people have plenty of time to accumulate free bags for reuse. Also, a ban would actually benefit local merchants who would no longer need to incur the expense of providing plastic bags. Yes, change takes some effort and leadership and is not the easy way out, but we must not let this paralyze us into inaction. Let's stop talking and make Lawrence a leader in achieving this highly beneficial change. Please ban single-use plastic bags now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Is that it? Public comment, Sherry, on Zoom?
Yes, Mayor.
All right, bring it back to the commission.
I wanted to clear up a couple of things. One thing that I think Terry Wilkie brought up, and I'll just need Randy for this. One of her questions about why a fee is an issue. Sorry, we'll wait for that. Thank you. Indeed, we could have such a fee, but it would have to go to the voters. We as a commission or as an administrative in this circumstance, we could not levy such a fee as has been previously discussed unless it was an initiative. Am I correct there?
Well, we have some ability to do sales tax and things like that, which is what we've done. And you could levy a sales tax to help pay for it. But otherwise, to put like a tax on plastic bags, which money would come to the city, or alcohol or cigarettes, which are your typical excise tax, the state has preempted us from doing that. So we can't put a tax, or we can't receive the money for any fee for plastic bags without being in violation of state statute.
Make sure. Thank you. Only a little clarification. I don't even know why I'm sticking my neck out to say this, but Kathy, I did kind of just want to clarify for the public, it is the Kansas Chamber of Commerce that has taken that as an issue, not the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. And let's all just remember that those are two different organizations, and our local partners are frequently or occasionally at odds with what happens at the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, and this might be one of those spaces. So, yeah. That's all I had for the moment.
Okay. Anybody else want to pipe in here?
Mayor, I
had a question.
clear.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Commissioner Sellers.
Yeah. Commissioner Sellers?
I had a quick question for anyone representing the SAB. Do we know of all our food retailers here in town, how many of them offer incentives for individuals who bring their own bags, whether they're plastic or reusable or paper? So like the Hy-Vees and Dillons and Sprouts of the world, do we know of all our food retailers, how many provide incentives?
Nancy's going to come and speak to that.
I don't know in general, but I know that both the Merck and Aldi do that.
Sure.
And Jefferson.
But the SAB haven't, in your research or anything, you haven't identified food retailers that provide incentives for those who bring bags in?
We did ask about that, Commissioner Sellers, I believe, with the 4 food retailers that we met with, and only one of them, I think, was the Merck that was represented there that talked about doing that. Dillon's and Hy-Vee, I believe, and one other, sorry, I can't remember right now, did not at the time.
Okay. And then it's discussion, but it's a question. In the work that you all have been doing and processing what a policy, what an ordinance would look like for the city, whether it's a ban or a fee, specifically in a ban, for those entities that do grocery pickup, would there be guidance as to how those businesses would then change and pivot from grocery pickup or delivery like Instacart, where if you are homebound or by choice, or even individuals who are WIC and TANF and EBT now have access to that, how would you see that pivot? Or how would you, if there's a ban, how would you expect those retailers to pivot with that?
Nancy's coming up to speak to that.
Thanks.
So we would be able to use paper bags or paper boxes to deliver food. So only the plastic bags would be banned in the ordinance, the latest ordinance that the SAB suggested.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Commissioner Sellers, on that?
No, I'm ready for discussion when everybody else is.
Okay. All right. So thoughts?
Well, initially I would say I definitely don't like the fee idea, but I'd be open to definitely education along with ban. I would like, it seems like the opening of a conversation, what was presented to us, I would like to explore more detail into, exactly what the ordinance would look like in terms of enforcement or any potential, dialing down to exemptions or, what would be included, what wouldn't be included. But that's probably for a later conversation, I guess. I guess they're just wanting what direction we initially want to go in.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Commissioner Sellers want to jump in?
Oh gosh, you guys are always trying to tag team for me to come in. I love the conversation tonight. I know I've shared with you kind of my thoughts on it, a more holistic thought on what this looks like. I know we've heard in the past about fees, doing bag fees, and I've always said, if we do a fee, how do you plan to implement it? What is your goal for it, and what is the strategy for it? And it's no different than with a ban or with education. I think education is always a component of either one of these, whether it's a fee or a ban. So to say outright education should be fluid through it all. So a policy around education, a law around education shouldn't be a law. It should be policy. It should be good policy in anything that we implement, that education is a component for it. So a policy standing alone based on education is a bad use of legislation, in my opinion. So I'll put that there. We've heard what a fee would look like if we wanted to venture down that path, adding that to a tax, or even if it, when we're seeing fluctuations in our food sales tax, would be kind of counterproductive. And then state tax law preempts us on that. So, and the fact that we would have to look into enforcement and fee structures and all of that being in-house, I don't know if we're ready for something like that. I like the thought of teasing out a ban and what that would look like, tightening up more of who would be impacted by this, because I feel like food retailers is one big global piece. I think there's more further conversation that needs to be had about that, good, bad, or different. I'm not saying that's where I'm at. I think there is definitely room for us to lean towards a single-use bag ban. What I would like to see from the SAB is what is that strategy, what is that playbook for working with the city to engage, communicate on that, because there is a huge this is environmental sustainability, but it's also environmental justice. And I've heard several people tonight, speak to this doesn't impact low-income people any more than any other people, but what I'm hearing that low income is being defined as individuals who go to just food. Low income people are a lot of people. By HUD standard, I'm low income. Many of us that are on the commission are low income. So the face of there's multiple diverse faces of low income. If we were to implement a fee, which I would be opposed to, that would disproportionately impact anyone that's receiving TANF, SNAP, or WIC. Because individuals that receive those, they don't pay tax. So if we were to tax or assess a fee, that would be a tax, which means that's money that they would have to come up with. That's why I would not support a bag fee. So if there's a ban, it still disproportionately impacts individuals who are on WIC, TANF, SNAP, or any other low-income marginalized group, because none of those individuals spoke today. There was no one here from NAACP to speak. There was no one here from representing the, WIC or those who may use SNAP benefits. So to say that that doesn't impact them, that's sitting from a place of privilege to say that I can't say that with certainty. That's why I asked for a playbook or a strategic strategy, I don't have to be a plan, but strategies as to how to bring those groups up to understand, because they are disproportionately impacted. That's what environmental justice is this greatly impacts individuals in that capacity. So for us to say, I am something, I didn't experience that, you may not have experienced that, but that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist and that it does experience individuals, because you have to understand the system of where that is. So I think there's the education piece, which should be a through line, regardless of legislation or policy that's built that an ordinance comes back to us and what that looks like. But I'm not opposed to what a single plastic ban ordinance would look like. And I think that's a path that I would be comfortable going with. I would be interested to know what that implementation would look like as it relates to grocery pickup, because that is a conversation you would need to have with retailers. That's a huge pivot. I don't mind getting my food in a box. If you order food online, it comes in a box. So I'm not opposed to that. And I don't think retailers would have that much of a gripe about it. It might even be great for them, because I use several grocery pickup here. There's one particular retailer that I do grocery pickup. And yes, I scratch my brain every time I go and pick up my groceries, because I have 11 bags that they give me. I give them right back to them, but I'm still trying to figure out why my frozen vegetables have to go in one bag. They can go in the same bag as my grapes. They'll actually keep my grapes cold, and I like my grapes to be cold. But anywho, I think for me, policy-wise, a ban would be the way to go. Definitely would like to see SAB do some work around what that education piece is going to be ongoing, because this is sustainability and we need to start intersecting it with justice. And that's how you get groups, your marginalized groups, on board, and you start educating them, because we're making assumptions that they know, because if they knew, they would be at the meetings. There's a lot of people who know things that don't come to our meetings, or else City Hall would be packed and there would be over 500 people on us watching us live. But that's not always the case. So we can't always assume that everyone is in the know and that we've done everything to make them in the know. We won't catch everybody, but we have to be intentional about addressing those who are disproportionately impacted, because they are.
Any other thoughts from folks? Okay, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'll go ahead. Yeah, I want to keep it simple. This has been discussed for a long time, since I've been on the commission, and I do believe that it's time to initiate an ordinance on a ban on plastic bags. The idea of a fee, I think, complicates it way too much. Doesn't need to be. Just want to keep it clean and simple, and that this would be an ordinance that would be enforced like any of other codes or ordinances or laws in the same manner as that. I do like the idea of having an educational component run parallel as we move forward with the ordinance. And the Sustainability Action Board has indicated that they are interested in pursuing that. And I think that would be a good way to provide or at least get feedback from folks in our community that this would impact, not may, but it would impact, but at the same time move forward with developing an ordinance to do the ban.
I guess I would say a couple things. I certainly don't like the fee. And the ban the ban would be better. I guess as with many things, I'm more concerned, kind of with I don't think the ordinance as it exists today, is ready. I think we need to understand the implementation, the education part of it. I have a real problem with the signage provision in this, that requires people to post signs. And the enforcement mechanism. So I don't think we're ready to, I don't think the ordinance is ready to pass a ban tonight, or to adopt this ordinance, which leads then to the question of, sending it back to SAB to work on to bring those back, send it to staff to work on to bring it back, and how that cross sections with the climate action plan. And when the climate action plan comes back to us, it has a list of priorities. Where does this fall on the list of priorities? And then how do we ask SAB and staff to prioritize the climate action plan at the same time as this going forward? And so, a lot of that's on us in the sense that it's floundered around. I mean, but now that we're coming up at the same time as the climate action plan and those priorities, I'm a little concerned about the whole timing of this. But if SAB thinks this is the highest priority of the things they're working on, then I think they need to work on bringing us back one that has an education plan, work on the signage issue, and work on the enforcement mechanism. But I'm a little concerned that when it comes back to us, it will be the same time as the climate action plan, and we'll be looking at, trying to prioritize those. So, but I could be wrong on that. I don't know the answer to that. But the ban is definitely better than the fee.
So you would prefer that it go back to the SAB or an option? Because I'd prefer it just to go back to staff or to start writing up the ordinance and then work with the SAB on the education part.
Well, I mean, again, the education part is one. I think SAB at least, again, I don't know how staff thinks about the required signage. I don't think it's legal.
Yeah.
And so the question is, do we ask for that to be looked at first by staff and then send it to SAB? Do we have SAB, draft the plan? Again, I guess those are what I'm asking the question for. Well, maybe Randy has an opinion off the top of his head. I know you haven't.
Yes,
you haven't asked.
And looking at that, we had issues regarding the signage and some of those things probably not being appropriate for an ordinance, but they would be, perfectly fine in a regulation or administrative thing. So that's kind of the idea how we had thought about it, perhaps running with the education portion of it and the signage portion of it and that type of deal in a regulation that would run parallel with the ordinance, whereas the ordinance would simply just address the ban and the enforcement procedures and go at it from that. That's kind of how staff was looking at it, but there are obviously other ways of doing it.
I think that seems like a really straightforward way to do it.
And then as far as the education component, which seems like there's some community partners here, and then of course, SABs sort of expressed their interest in the education portion of it. How do we aid them? Because it isn't normally not normally what we ask an advisory board to do. That's not normally their work. So how do we empower them to do that work with our partners, or do we send that, or do we involve our engagement person, or what do we do so that Kathy has what she needs to follow up on that? That's kind of I agree on all those. Just want to make sure we've got the next step on the education component.
Thoughts?
Or is it just that we have them come up with the plan and come back to us? Like, because it doesn't seem like there's, to Commissioner Seller's point, there's not really a playbook regarding it. So
that could be the first step. Come back and talk to us about that.
Let sustainability look at that.
Well, I guess my question would be, and maybe Ben could answer this. I know with human relations, I know that group has worked closely with legal, and where they've done some pre-work and then they pass it over to legal. Is this something that, do you feel like there's been enough information shared in previous discussion with legal that you feel comfortable with staff taking this over, having legal take a look at it and bring it back to the SAB to then give it the look through overview, and then it comes to us?
Yeah, I mean, Nancy should speak to this as well. I think what Commissioner Shipley brought up, that this is, we are willing to, but this is beyond usually what an advisory board does, is an important point. The other side is what you raised earlier, Commissioner Sellers, which this has to be collaborative. I mean, you guys have said specific points of elements in this that you want to see changed. But frankly, we could continue to take shots in the dark of what we think that looks like and send it back to you guys. And then you guys go, oh, that's not what we meant, or here's some other things, or that's not going to pass snuff with legal. So to get this over home plate, this has to be a collaborative effort, maybe like what you outlined, where staff and legal takes it and tries to fix those things you guys have outlined, and then brings it back to us if needed, or brings it back to you guys. I mean, certainly we want to be engaged on the educational piece, but I'm not aware, for example, I was not aware of like how the signage, for example, could not be legal, like Commissioner Finkeldine raised. So we don't know what we don't know, right? Almost. And so rather than us just continuing to take shots in the dark to fix it how we thought you guys might want it, I think it has to be collaborative.
Thank you, Ben.
Commissioner Sellers and Nancy would like to add on that with Ben. Quick.
So when I said the SAB could work on it, I was suggesting to come up with some plans, not to implement those plans necessarily, but we could certainly come up with some suggestions for the education. If you want us to do more than that, I think it's sort of beyond an advisory board, but I know there's individuals who would be happy to work on that.
Okay, thank you, Nancy.
Well, then my point will still be that we need to make sure we follow up so that we give Kathy then what she needs to follow up on whatever those recommendations are, or whatever our recommendations are. Just because the ordinance goes through, we don't forget the education piece.
Okay. So how do we want to move forward on this tonight?
I guess my kind of question on all of that, and maybe specifically, to all the divisions, SAB, legal, and then maybe Craig is overall with the city. I mean, what kind of timeline are we looking at, and how does that affect like the climate plan in your case and other work we are doing in both these arenas and all our arenas? I don't know who starts, but
I would just quickly mention the climate action plan. I don't think that there's really any conflict there. It seems like the two items will be running parallel for a little bit and maybe intersect. But really where I want to hear, who I would want to hear from is Randy and the city attorney's office in terms of timeline due to their workload.
We are down an attorney at this time, but I believe we could have something back to you in March. I'm going to be out the third week in February, so that's kind of puts a little damper on that one as well. But we could do something by March.
So would that be like a rough ordinance outline, or?
We'd have an ordinance, however you wanted us to do. We can have an ordinance ready to look at, and then you guys can make changes to it as you saw fit, or if you wanted us to run it by the SAB, have them look at it as well. We could do that. There's some things about, they were talked about a 9-month period of time before the ordinance went into effect. So would there be an educational piece before the ordinance would go into effect, or would the ordinance go into effect immediately? So there's some of those things we'll have to discuss. Okay.
And there may be budget impacts on the enforcement that we wouldn't be able to, make decisions on. That would have to be with the commission. Okay. So we could bring something back in March, but it probably wouldn't be like a first reading.
Okay.
Right.
Scenario.
Okay. Thank you. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah. Commissioner Sellers?
It does. I just want to make sure that in that process there is space, that there's communication, or at least there's a liaison from SAB that is in communication with legal on some of those technical pieces. Because again, we don't have anybody speaking to the subject matter expertise of the Sustainability Advisory Board. So I just want to make sure that they have an opportunity to answer some of those technical questions, whether it's through communication with Kathy, which is through legal, but there needs to be that collaborative piece there.
Thank you. Is that provide direction enough for staff to get going? Okay. Anything else you need? Must.
No.
Okay.
I think we're good.
All right. So we're to move forward. The staff will bring back a draft ordinance, and then we'll start working with it from that. Okay. Got it.
Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, can I just give a shout out? Thanks, Kathy. But also I wanted to say, I noticed in your slide there, you said there's no KP on waste reduction. And I'm going to have that swirling around in my head. I don't know if you meant to slide that in there and give us something to think about, but that's going to be in the back of my head. So thank you.
All right. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We've been here since 5, so a little break here and we'll be back. of government and direct staff as appropriate.
Commissioners, Tony Wheeler, City Attorney. Staff doesn't have a presentation planned. This was an item that the commission requested be returned for discussion in January. You last discussed this in August of 2022. So, we have sort of provided some background materials in the agenda report, but this really is an opportunity for the commission to have a discussion about what, if any, changes it wants to consider and what steps or what you'd like staff to do next.
Okay. So who would like to start this off?
Questions or discussion?
Yes, questions?
I guess I have a couple questions. Randy, on the timing of possibilities. If we, and there would be one option, which is to have a special election at some point. Do you have any feel if, I was trying to do some math in my head. I mean, could we even do a special election in the spring to have it on the fall, this November's ballot, or are we way too close to that?
I think that would be very difficult in that the filing date is early June. So we'd have to have everything done and all the ordinances in place and the vote be done and tallied and everything before we could do that. So I think it would be extremely difficult to get that done before that period of time.
And I think there's I forget the longest period, which is overseas military. You have to have the ballots done and in place and mailed like 60, 75 days.
Right. I don't believe we could. Yeah. In fact, it may not even be difficult. I think it would probably be impossible to get the special election held and get everything in place before the filing dates in June.
But then we would have the option about putting it either, if we do something, put it in either on this November's ballot or the following, presidential ballot, correct?
That's correct. It could be either November election, either November of 2023, because there's municipal elections, then it could be on that ballot, or it could be November of 2024. Yes.
In either case, they'd go into effect in November 25 would be the earliest.
And in either event, the first election of the new government would occur in November of 2025. Yes.
And again, just because I've been asked the question, we can't hold a special election to elect commissioners at some different time than the November of 25 or November 23.
Right. No, we could not. Yes. They're set for that date by statute and by our ordinances.
Yeah.
But just to follow up, it is up to us if we want to have that ballot question either this year or next year, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Those were my only clarification questions.
Okay.
Do you know what the general cost is of putting a measure like that on?
If it is part of a regular election that the county is holding, there would be no additional expense.
Commissioner Sellers, do you have any questions?
No, the ones I was going to pose, Commissioner Finkeldye had already entertained.
Okay. If there's no more questions, then we will move it to public comment.
Hello, I'm Dustin Stumlingbear, and I was on the committee regarding the expansion of the city commission. That was last year, wasn't it? No, holy cow, it seems like a long time ago. And I've always supported larger government bodies, all forms of governance. It just allows more people to feel like they can engage with their representatives. And in this particular case, I really would support our city commission becoming districts. And I would say go balls to the wall and up it to 10. I know that might seem extreme, but for the amount of people, like when we first turned to a city commission of like this from our old city council, there was only 24,000, the most recent census record at that time, there were 24,000 residents of Lawrence. That was 8,000 people per city commissioner. The next it got changed, it was about the same population size, not city, but 8,000 to 9,000 per commissioner. Now it's closer to 20,000 per commissioner. And that seems like a lot, and it is. And I'm not saying you guys don't do hard work. You respond to me all the time. I can reach out to you, but I know I'm an anomaly. I know I come here regularly. I know, I've run for this office. So I know I can talk to all of you. And not everyone feels that way. They feel, having talked to a lot of people throughout the community, that there's a bridge between them and the city commission. There's a bridge between them and the county commission that they just feel like they can't cross. I know that's not the case because I know all of you very well, and you're very personable people. You've listened to us all the time, even if we don't agree. You listen, and I think that's something that could be addressed if we are in districts, and it's also easier for people to run. There's a lot of money and a lot of effort that goes into running for an at-large position on this city commission. It's a hell of a lot of work. Not everyone can put that kind of work in. Not everyone can do that kind of fundraising. And that shouldn't bar them from being able to serve their community in this capacity. But if we go to districts, that mitigates that by a large scale. If you go to 6 districts, as what was proposed by the committee, that certainly is helpful. But I say 10 because 10,000 people on average, you only have about a third of those voting in city elections. That reduces your amount of time that you have to put in, the amount of money that you have to raise to try and get that voice out. And so I'm looking at this not only from a voter engagement perspective, but also from candidates running and the variety of candidates we can get running for office in that setting. And I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to discuss this again. Thank you.
Okay, other public comment?
Hi, this is Chris Flowers. I sent in public comment and I've just been thinking about this. I've been following this issue a lot. It's one of my big issues I've been following. And just when I think about this, I ask why? Why are we doing this? And I hope you do too. And I'm just curious what your response would be. And when I ask why, I think my response would be to increase voter turnout and to get that turnout to mirror how our population looks. And I just wanted to talk about who I think are right now, how our system works. I think the biggest losers are college students and renters. And I think y'all should be thinking about ranked choice. Like if we do go to districts, you should also be thinking about ranked choice because the primary happens the first Tuesday in August, but that's when renters are moving and the college students aren't even here. So, and you talk about, like Democrats talk about how the Republicans, they're trying to make it harder to vote by mail and to use drop boxes. And I think I read a story that that's one of the Republicans' issues is to crack down on the cheating Biden Democrats, trying to steal the elections. But my point is, if they're going to crack down absentee ballots and using drop boxes, how is it fair that the people, the renters who play their places, sometimes they're not ready till the 5th or more in August. So they're out of town, staying somewhere else because they currently don't have an apartment in Lawrence. How is it fair that they have to drive back to Lawrence to vote? Because according to Democrats, and I agree with this, I'm not trying to disparage Democrats, but they also claim, well, it's not fair in these urban places where they only have a few polling places and there's like lines are 2 or 3 hours long. And if we're going to be saying, well, this is a problem at state and federal levels, how is our college students and our renters having a primary when they're not in town? How is that fair if these other issues are a problem at the state and federal level? So I definitely think if you're going to districts, and how would it look like if we went to districts? Because if you look at our state and county, it's only like 3 or 4 maybe I mean, sometimes it's only one. So you could definitely go to ranked choice if it's only 3 and 4 and skip the primary and just do ranked choice in the fall.
Thank you, Chris. Other public comment on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, bring it back to the commission for discussion.
I guess I can jump in. I mean, I was one of the folks who wanted to bring this back. I guess, I mean, I do support the 6. I mean, the recommendation, the 6 and the direct elected mayor. We obviously don't have the votes to pass that. So I'll say that. But then unless some people have changed their mind, I don't know that we have the votes for that. I know back last time we discussed this, kind of at the last minute, we had a couple other options. And one of those was, full districts, 2 at large and a direct elected mayor. And, for all the reasons I support 6, I think that setup would be better than the system we have now, for some of the same reasons Dustin said and the committee said, that I do think districts do offer the chance of better representation. With the 4 and the 2 and the 1, I think you have, I do think that, on one hand, you could say it doesn't go as far as the 6 districts. On the other hand, you can say it reduces the concern some people have about having everybody in a district. And so I do think it's better than the system we have now. I think both going to 7 and the direct elected mayor and the districts would all be a step in the right direction. I'd be very interested in getting that an ordinance drafted that look like that, bring it back. As we can tell, we didn't get a lot of public comment tonight because no one knows what we're talking about. So I think we have to have an ordinance that has something in it for them to come out to react to. So I'd like to see coming back with an ordinance of 4 districts, 2 at large, and a direct elected mayor, and get some feedback on that ordinance. A couple other minor details in my thought process is we could put it on either ballot, but I think we'd be better off putting it in the presidential ballot. 1, because you have more people voting, and 2, because you'd be closer in time to actually, having the election. If you did that in the presidential election, if we put it on the ballot, this November, we'd have, 2 years, a year and a half before anyone was running under it. So, and then lastly, I would say, I think if we did head in that direction and we thought there was some support for that, I'd want to consider also making a change where we elected people to 4-year terms, so that when we had that next election, we could elect 3 more people to 4-year terms and we wouldn't have anyone getting a 2-year term at that point. So just a couple thoughts. That's kind of the direction I'd like to see. And again, see what feedback we have on that particular option, because we've not put that option out for public feedback.
So you said have 4-year positions?
Everybody have a 4-year. Yeah.
Starting with, if it passes, starting with when it's put on the ballot. So when it's put on the ballot in 2024 or 2023, is that what you're saying?
No, what I guess I was saying is, and again, I'd like to see what this looks like, but if we don't change anything with the 2023 election, and then it passes in 2024, when you get to 2025, you would have 2 commissioners with 4-year terms, 1 commissioner with a 2-year term, 3 new commissioners, and a directly elected mayor.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those people running in the 2025 election would have to get a 2-year term so that they were up in 2027.
Right. Got it.
Whereas if in 2023 we elected 3 people to 4-year terms, which I think we could change without changing the ordinance, then when we got to not change the ordinance, without having to have a vote.
Correct. We can change the terms by just amending the ordinance.
Yeah. So that when
the city code.
Yeah, exactly. So then when we got to 2025, we could just have the 3 new seats up as well as a directly elected mayor, and no one would be running for an odd seat. Would be my thought process on that. It wouldn't have to be that way, but that's my thought process.
What if it doesn't pass?
Doesn't pass, then you have people with 4-year terms, which again, one of the reasons I like going to 7 is I don't like 2-year terms. That's one of I think 2-year terms have historically not been useful to the commission. I think we have a lot of turnover. And so I think at the worst case, we get rid of the 2-year term, which isn't a bad thing.
I could go with you on a journey like that if I just had some clarifications. The 4 districts I get, but we can come back to that because I think you've got some comments on that too. The 2 at large, the only thing I would want to make sure is we don't run into the same problem we do now, which is having people running against each other. So as long as it was set up that it was a seat, which we could do now, by the way, but that it was a seat and people would run for seat A and seat B, then that would solve our.
Well, and again, I looked to Randy to see if this was possible, but I mean, I think you would have in 2025, you'd have, 2 districts and an at-large. Right. And in 2027, you'd have 2 districts and at-large. Okay. So the at-large would never run against each other.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
The only trick I don't know is if you have 3 sitting commissioners with a 4-year term. I guess in theory, if all 3 of them lived in the same district, we'd have a problem where we create the district. So we could make sure that didn't happen, I guess.
Theoretically, yes, we have to draw the district so that there is an equal number of people so that everybody is equally represented, or at least a reasonable facsimile there has to be close.
Yeah.
We have to be, so that everybody is equally represented, but we could work that out.
Yeah.
Some of those.
So I think you'd put, again, ask this question, could you put 2 people, if you have 4 people, you have 3 people elected to 4-year terms and this passed, could you say A goes to District A, B goes to District B, and C gets the at-large?
Theoretically, yes, we could do that and set it up that way.
Yeah. And again, that way you'd never have the 2 at-large people running against each other. And again, if you didn't give people 4-year terms, you would end up having an election in 25 where 2 at-larges were running against each other. Now you could change that. One of them would get a 2-year term and one of them would get a 4-year term, probably would be one option, I guess. But I like the idea of having the 3 people with 4-year terms and just putting them in those 3 and then having an election. That way the at-large people never run against each other. And then the mayor would be running at large, obviously, but they wouldn't be running against the commission person.
Yeah. And then the only clarification on the 3rd part of that, the mayor part, is that we actually distinguish what the duties of the mayor are previous to us throwing that on the ballot, because I think that's really important, creating the balance of power and influence of the mayor. I suggested last time that the mayor perhaps be non-voting unless in the case of a tie. And I think that would be very beneficial. Certainly running the meetings, being there in the event of a tie, doing appointments, all the things that they do now would be a great way to balance that influence.
And Randy, I assume we could obviously do that, right? I mean, that
correct. Yes, that would be what they call a weak mayor. They would only vote to break a tie. So you could have a strong mayor that would always elect or vote on all options, and then it's what they call a weak mayor. So yes, and a council type of government. What you're discussing here is very similar to what Olathe has. It's a modified mayor, council, manager form of government is what they call it. There is some statutes that do exist that set that up. We'd have to look at those a little bit, but yes. And we can always change the duties of the mayor to set it up however it was. Now, that will be in the resolution. We'll have to set the terms, how it's going to be set up, what the duties of the mayor and that type of deal. That would be on the resolution that would then put it on the ballot. So.
I like the idea of having non-voting or voting in a tie situation only for the mayor. I like that idea.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like it is in Olathe. I think they exactly have the 4-2-1 as well. But yeah, I'm fine with everything Commissioner Finkelney said, and also Commissioner Shipley in terms of the mayor.
Commissioner Sellers.
I think Commissioner Finkeldine covered a lot, and I do appreciate Commissioner Shipley bringing up those concerns. I know in regards to conversations around a directly elected mayor, and I think there's some opportunities here to create that delineation so that there are abilities for the mayor to create sustainability, have sustainability in message, and then in their vision for the city and how that pairs with the strategic plan. I think as we start to parse that out, I can support that. I've always from the beginning supported a hybrid model. There's equitability in that. I mean, expanding it to even bigger. 100 years ago, we had 12 folks on the commission and a lot more Black and brown people, and then something happened, and we can make hypotheses about what that was that caused that regression. But I think 6 is a good, knowing that we have a mayor that will only vote in ties. I think will expand and give us more voice. The at-large piece creates an opportunity of a step towards equitability in our community and getting those out to vote. And actually it's a strategic piece. And I think that just comes with, that'll come with time as people know how to navigate that. I am of the mind to support this being on a presidential election, simply because we do, I think that's an equitability piece, because we still know that turnout is not always the same in municipal as it is in general or presidential elections. So something of this magnitude as form of government, I think to Mr. Flowers' point, as we don't want to suppress the votes and the voices of college students with primaries and whatnot, this is kind of using that same vein to say presidential elections get more people turned out, and it puts it on their mind. I would love for staff to bring back that technical change. As far as terms, that was something that I opposed to legal. We've always discussed it. As someone who is living that, I hope I've been of value to the commission being in my second year. But it does, I think someone that comes in third, a commissioner that placed third, is no less than for second. That's all that's all political, not politics. That's all political. And so one's work that they did to place third is no different than the work that was done to place first or second. And so for us to, what seems like, punish them for that, that is something we should have changed a long time ago. So, and I know Commissioner Shipley has shared those supplements. And so we have the ability to do that now. We don't have to wait for a ballot initiative. So I'd like for that to come back in front of us. I'd like to see the language around the hybrid 4-2 and having that on the ballot in 2024. So I do appreciate Commissioner Finkeldine kind of coming out the gates hot with that. So thank you, sir, for leading that discussion.
If I could also, thank you. If I could follow up with that, my only other discussion I would like to have about districts, and I think Commissioner Finkeldine, you might have some expansion on that too. Something brought up last time, which I didn't even think about till the very last minute, and then a member from a neighborhood pointed out, our community has divided itself a little differently, neighborhoods, core neighborhoods, however you want to call it. And some of them may take a great deal of exception to being divided by one of these districts. So I think that'll be an important question, even though I don't personally think this is a big deal. Partly, only 2 people showed up tonight. So I just don't think people are as worried about this as we are. But you put it on a ballot and let people make the decision. I'm not going to interfere with that. I'm going to go on this journey with you. But I do think that could be something that would derail this. So do you have any thoughts about how we could look at districts without establishing them in advance?
Well, you have a thought? I was going to say, one, I'd say we watched the county go through a process, but they statutorily had to have it done by January 1st after the election. We don't have that requirement. We would have to have it done in time for June, for a filing deadline in June. So we'd have more time to work through that process than the county did. So I would say that on one hand, Second, I would say it, I think you'd probably do this after the 23 election, but before the vote. I'd say this. I don't think you could bind a future, say for sure that this is what the districts are going to look like. But if you have 5 commissioners on, that are elected in 23, all of them are going to be there in early 25. There's a pretty good chance that if the 5 of them came up with some districts before the vote, not that you couldn't change your mind, but it would be, you could consider that, doing that in advance. I would say I don't think you could make some promise that no neighborhood would be broken up, because the law doesn't allow that. The law requires contiguous and same size. And those are the 2 things we have to follow.
We do have to follow precinct lines. That's one thing. Yes, that's one thing that the statute requires, is that when we draw it, we do have to follow precinct lines, so that for the county and the voting purposes, that we don't split up a precinct. So
that's a great point too. Some neighborhoods, they don't follow precinct lines. And, you might be able to get the whole thing in one, but you might not. So I don't think we could promise that in advance, but those are my initial thoughts. Maybe I don't know if you're about to jump in.
That's sort of along that line about any future commissions, as well as, just the idea that, we can definitely look at neighborhoods to try to see how they would divide up, but we just couldn't guarantee it. You definitely want to consider that. No.
I just wanted to point it out if we're all kind of in this agreement, just to point out something that might detract from this.
Yeah.
Or if we do want to go forward with putting on the ballot, think about how we can communicate with neighborhoods about that.
And Commissioner Sibley, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm glad Randy spoke to it, because that's what exactly I was going to say. I mean, precinct, we have to look at it from the perspective of contiguous and precincts, and that has to be the messaging. And this kind of disrupts that. The idea of there's a potential for neighborhoods to be whole neighborhood associations or whatnot in one district, and that just may not be the case. And so whether an organization or an association sees that as good, bad, or indifferent, that's out of our hands. That's state statute. So, I can see an argument. For something to be derailed because of that, I would have that concerns me, because that's taking a very superficial that's a very superficial argument for something as deep and rich as representative government, and how we ensure that is equitable and accessible to as many as possible in our community.
Maybe, but also districts don't necessarily do what we think districts do. So if those, it's not my feelings, it's about what those neighborhoods or those associations who have established themselves through a great deal of work, how they feel. It's not about my feelings. If they feel like they're represented right now in the situation we're in, then yeah, they can vote against it. If you think that's petty, that's fine. But I'm not here to question what those groups do, because what they do has been effective.
I think for some of those groups, and what we also have to look at is some of those groups have been very effective in pushing a one-sided agenda, but it may not be the agenda of the collective. So having grown up in a district and seeing the power of the collective in a district, I support that, but that's also coming from a community that had concentrations of populations.
Exactly.
So I understand that doesn't necessarily transfer here, but we also have to look at it that BIPOC voices are diluted, and that's the task force said that. So, and sometimes within those communities and in those associations and in those neighborhoods, voices are not always heard. And so maybe having a district could bring that out and could elevate that even more. or it may have the adverse. I get that, but I you know, I'd like
Yeah,
to think I'd like to be more optimistic in this case than pragmatic though. But I definitely understand and hear where you're coming from.
So it sounds like we've got consensus.
Sounds
So let's
like.
move to, we're looking at 4 district positions, 2 at-large positions for commissioners, 4 years each, and then elected mayor, 4-year, which would only vote in a tie-breaking situation. Is that?
Would maintain.
Then maybe put some of those other things about the mayor that the task force came up with. And
Yeah.
Well, they just left everything the way it was.
Does that make
Kind of left
sense?
that up to us.
Yeah, so what the task force came up with was basically what's in the city code currently.
Yeah.
So it's, appointments and represent the city at conferences and things like that.
And we had consensus on putting this on in 2024 is what I
Yeah,
got.
2024 and
Make
then
sure.
2025.
Okay.
I think so, to ensure
Yeah.
well, not ensure, but to hopefully get a higher voter turnout.
And also on going ahead with the 2023 election and changing the terms to 4-year terms.
I think we'd want to see those together and have a talk about that.
Yeah, I'd like to talk-
There'll be a different ordinance,
Right.
but we could put them together.
I'd like to see how that looks.
Yeah, to see how that looks.
To change the terms would be an ordinance. The resolution, it would be a resolution to put it on the ballot.
Yeah.
That would have all that information that regarding the terms, the mayor, the duties, and that type of deal.
But I guess, I think what we do have to decide, correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, I mean, the resolution would read differently if we have 2 people with 2-year terms and one with a 2-year term, right? Because you'd have to describe what the steps are.
Correct. Right.
So
We may
we have to ask,
describe how we're going to place people into districts and things like that as well in the resolution, so that that's all known up front.
so we either have to ask Randy to bring us 2 resolutions to look at that have 2 different things, or we need to direct him to bring us one, that has the assumption that everyone has 4 years, or the assumption that we stay the same. Now, we don't have to approve it, but
When you see it.
we want to see what it looks like. So I guess my preference would be to see one that has, with the assumption that there's 3 people with 4-year terms. We might not like it, but that's the one I'd like to see, but I don't know if that's at least 3 of us want to see that.
Right. And if we do go to change it to everybody to having a 4-year term, we would need to have that ordinance passed and in effect before June 1, so that everybody who files for an office knows that the top 3 vote getters are going to have 4-year terms.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. Does that sound reasonable?
It sounds fun.
Commissioner Sellers, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I'd like to know Randy, when do you think that you could circle that back to us?
When would you like it? Other than the third weekend, February.
Other
we're
than
not-
the 3rd week in February.
We just need enough time to make sure we have opportunity to talk about it and before June 1st, right?
Yes.
Obviously,
Yeah.
way before that.
If you think you can have it before the 3rd week of February, I think that would be wonderful.
I will try or have it. I will try the 2nd week of February or the 1st week in March.
Okay.
I like that.
I will know enough time in advance whether it's going to happen the 2nd week of February.
So latest first week of March, hopefully earlier. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Thank you, Randy.
All right. Ready to move on? We're now into commission items. Does anybody have a commission item?
I kind of did. Oh, go ahead. You go.
Say real quick. No, I was just going to say real quick. It's not necessarily a commission item, but if I could entertain that, while I am virtual, Randy is in the building, and I feel like that's a conspiracy. So
Yeah.
Or you're one and the same, one of the.
maybe
this
next
is-
time, Randy.
Yes.
I've been holding this in my pocket since we went to the convention in at the convention center in Missouri. One of the groups I went to was about railroad relationships with municipalities. And it was a pretty spectacular meeting. They had at least one of the top two administrators of all of the big railroad companies there in person. And they were making some pretty ambitious promises to be much better at communicating with municipalities, owing to the fact that there's some money for things like, the change of at-grade railroads or removing them. There's a bunch of money. They were kind of talking about those issues. So what I wanted to bring up, and Diane, I know you're on your way, but so this will fall to Brandon. You've done, I know, a little research with BNSF about whether we could make Liarda into a park, quote unquote. And I know when you sort of reported to us that when you spoke with them, they said, well, we don't really sell land. I just wanted to point out, we don't need them to sell us the land. We can still operate a park on their land no differently than we do with the Army Corps of Engineers. So I didn't know if that might be a different discussion. And when I look especially at their goals, they have diversity, equity, inclusion goals too. It may be that we would explain this story to them and they would want to do it. So I just wondered if we might be able to kick that back and have a different discussion and not be about land sales, but about how we could, ultimately we want to tell a positive story about their railroad. Like we want to tell a good story and how that affects our community, our Latino community. So I just wanted to kick that back and put that into place. I know it doesn't match a KPI exactly, but it certainly fits in with our strategic plan of making people feel welcome and at home. So I'm sorry you won't be able to do that, but I have every confidence that Brandon can. So.
Any other commission items? Commissioner Sellers, commission item? Nope. Yeah, I do have one. I brought up in December about the possibility of putting together a program under the NRA, which is the Neighborhood Revitalization Act, for potential tax incentives for property owners to upgrade, maintain their house. I know other communities have this, and I would like to, with the commission's permission, to have staff start working on what that would look like. Maybe start out with having them research other cities that have these programs and what they look like, and potentially what it would look like for us if we did something like that. And I would also add on to that, just to look at, I'm not saying it be, is the potential to have possibly tax incentive for property owners to accept vouchers. I don't know if that's acceptable, but I would at least like to see it talked about.
But wait, you what was that last piece?
The voucher program, as you know, we've been trying to encourage folks to, especially landlords, to take vouchers, is whether or not there could be something involved that we could provide some level of incentive for if property owners accept the vouchers. At least have a discussion about it.
I'd be interested in a discussion. I'm a little concerned as, and no offense to you, Mayor, the fact that you've brought it to question as a recent HUD voucher, as a landlord who has recently decided to accept HUD vouchers, it kind of puts you in my opinion, in a weird conflict. So it's interesting that you would bring that to attention, knowing that we've heard so much about what is currently being done in that capacity. And I think there needs to be a bigger discussion based on what I heard from the public hearing on the understanding around vouchers, and that HUD vouchers are not the same as other vouchers that agencies provide, which is in the form of an assistance. So I think there's a little bit of change mix up there. I just have a little bit of angst with that. I'm not opposed to having the discussion. I think it needs to be part of a more bigger discussion. Under, I would say probably under a strong and welcoming neighborhoods presentation, and maybe, so I would put that there. Your NRA item piques my curiosity. I would like to see that maybe brought back by staff in one of the outcome presentations. So I don't know if you were thinking that would fall up under a partnership with Strong Welcoming Neighborhoods and economic prosperity, or solely economic prosperity. So did you have an idea as far as when you say staff, I'm thinking outcome team. So is there a specific outcome team that you have in mind that would drive that work?
Well, I think it definitely meets some of our strategic plan ideas, especially in safe and welcoming neighborhoods. I'm sure there could be other areas. At this time, I'm not picking a certain area that needs to go under. I think I would leave that up to staff to take a look at it and to see where it best fits within our strategic plan.
And I would disagree. I would say I think staff would want us to be able to direct them as where we see that. If you're looking at it from, I think there's a little bit of a cross section there, that you have the incentive piece, because it's kind of economic, but it's more housing. So just as we're processing through it, and just at first bat, where would you feel comfortable with it going? Economic prosperity or strong welcoming neighborhoods?
I think it crosses both areas for sure. So again, I'm just asking for staff. I'm just asking for staff to take a look at this, first look at it, and to see what sort of programs are out there at this point in time, and whether or not, what could it potentially look like for Lawrence, and then we can look at and having a more in-depth conversation about where that goes.
So I would quickly propose that it goes to strong and welcoming neighborhood, to that outcome team.
I guess I would say I'd leave it to staff to decide, but I think economic development, because Britt understands NOAs, and we use NOAs already, and this would be a specific type of an NOA. So I think personally, it seemed like to me, Britt would be the one, in economic development would be the one who would come back with the most knowledge. But I guess I'd leave it to staff to make that decision. I have, Mayor, after you've brought that up, I've looked more into Baldwin and how they're using it in Baldwin. And I know I've talked some to the county staff, and they've got a pretty good system going there in Baldwin, and understanding how that works. And it's gaining popularity there. And I've talked to a few folks in Baldwin who have been pretty excited about the impacts it's had in Baldwin. So I do think we have a lot of, even in this community, we can see how we have resolutions to see how it's done. We have a county, who knows how to run the NOA part. And so, I would also suggest we look at what Baldwin did as a starting point, as opposed to just, but then second, I would say, I did watch, and so, the housing, we'll listen to the housing, discussion, I guess. And it was brought up in that meeting about possibly doing vouchers as a voucher-based NRA to encourage vouchers, or an economic incentive, as opposed, someone brought that up as as opposed to requiring having that as an option. And so I do think that's something I'm interested in at least getting the answer to. Maybe not separately, but maybe as part of this discussion. And that might lead into something I'm going to ask when we get to the city manager report on future agenda. But, I think I'm interested in hearing the answer to that question.
Yeah, my purpose would be to leave it up to staff, to Craig, to figure out where that information would be best come from. And then from there, we can decide.
I'd be interested in hearing that, especially with the aspect that Commissioner Finkeldye brought about that might encourage landlords to participate in the program a little bit.
Mayor, if I may, that item was pretty clear. We had a lot of consensus on, but we moved quickly, and I apologize, I didn't ask earlier. On this follow-up to this conversation with the railroads, do we have consensus that we're allowing staff to spend time looking into that?
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we had some.
It went through the Parks and Recs Advisory Board, and it just kind of stalled. So, but thank you for supporting that.
Staff could.
Yeah, we'll continue to have conversations with the railroad, and hopefully they will be looking at things a little differently.
Okay, thank you. So is that clear, Sherry?
Yes, thank you.
Everything's clear. Any other commission items? All right, we're on to reviewing the city manager. No, I'm sorry. We're on to reviewing future agenda items. Excuse me.
That is in the city manager.
Oh, this is the city manager's report.
Yes, I was looking for a
Entire-
report. I didn't see it.
Yeah, the entire city manager's report. So, we listened and rebalanced, and we might have a nice closure here tonight time. And it looks like the balance out on January 17th, we had some people take some stuff off. So we are trying to get the balance. Also, we did remind our team to populate the further out dates. And we've had some discussion about that recently. So hopefully you'll see a better balance there, and we can not hit 11 o'clock too many other times.
Thank you.
The other thing I would just comment is I was doing a little bit of calculation, and 15 years of meetings is hundreds of meetings. And though this is the last paid meeting, you're welcome anytime. That's a lot of time she's been in this room doing this with a lot of people. So just again, putting that.
Small compared to the time she spends behind the scenes making sure things get done. Thank you, Diane, so much.
I did have a quick question on future agenda or a little related to that. I'm just curious, looking ahead to the discussion on Chapter 10 ordinance. I mean, what do we think that's going to look like after listening to that big meeting and all the concerns and lots of people showing up? I mean, are we expecting a presentation where we've heard those questions and we're presenting answers before we get going, or do we just say, here it is again, public comment? I mean, do we have a plan for how we're going to present that? And if so, I kind of ask that because not so much to say how to do it, but maybe we have a discussion if that's how we want to, to proceed. I'm a little concerned it's going to be a free for all.
Well, the meeting that we had last Thursday was very well attended. As if you've watched the video, we had quite a bit of participation. Kalina Coleman is supposed to be sort of summarizing the comments that we received and trying to provide a summary that will be available with the agenda items on the 17th. We also are keeping track of the questions that were posed and are trying to develop a document that answers those questions. Also, that will be ready on the 17th. But the ordinance that will come back to you will be the one that you saw in December, because we haven't received any direction for any amendments. So to the extent that there are members of the public that spoke last Thursday or on the 17th requesting various amendments, we will not have those ready because, we'd want to make sure that the commission is interested in entertaining those.
Okay.
But you'll be aware of what they are.
Yeah, based on who attended. If new people show up, of course, we wouldn't know that.
Well, I appreciate that work. I was a little concerned we wouldn't have time to get all that ready for the 17th. So appreciate that.
We're working really hard.
Appreciate that.
Okay. So we're on to calendar items. Public comment on this item. Thank you. None? Anybody on Zoom for public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, back up to here. And now we're on to calendar items. Anything that we need to talk about?
There is a ribbon cutting on there I'll draw your attention to for next week that says tentative because we don't have a definite for that. I don't know if that's something you all could look at least, maybe not answer tonight, but if.
It's tentative or none of us said we could do it?
I believe there's
Yeah, this is the first time.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't say what it's.
Well, I'll make sure I'll resend that to you all.
Okay.
I believe we had a confirmation and then it changed. So we'll get that sent back out. Thank you.
Although I'm already at something at like 4, so.
Yeah.
It's all day.
All right. Anything else? That's all on the calendar items. Then we are.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Got to move to adjourn first and second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Sellers?
Nay.
Passes 4-1.
Got that one no vote in for 2023.
There you go.